Welcome to a Community Partners interview, where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Lilly, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio. All abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Marg McLean, the Executive Director of Alice Saddy. Alice Saddy explores a welcoming and diverse and inclusive community where all people are welcomed and are contributing citizens. Alice Saddy's values are respect, collaboration, accountability, and creativity. Thank you for joining us today, Marg.
Thank you. Nice to be with you, Lilly. So thanks so much.
Marg, could you tell us a little bit more about you and what inspired you to work for Alice Saddy?
Sure. And I'm just gonna mention that Alice Saddy Association was named after and was created really after the death of a woman in London named Alice Saddy, and her family was very present in the city of London. And so it's been a great honor, actually, to be part of Alice Saddy Association. And I'm mentioning that just because my earliest of times and sort of what kind of led me here was I have worked with people with that label of developmental disability for pretty much since I was about 18 years old. And now I'm older than that, that's for sure. And so for about the last 40 years or so, and a little bit more. And I have been involved with services in London for quite a long time. But then I was away for a while. And when there was an opportunity to come back and work in London for the Alice Saddy Association, it was just a real privilege. So your question to me was really, why did I get doing what I'm doing? And I think like many people that I've met through the years, it's because I knew somebody who had that label, and that person, Brian, was a neighbor, and our families were best friends as families. And Brian was one of those guys who was in the early days of institutions in Ontario, the big government-run developmental service institutions. Brian was one of those guys. The family was recommended to have him live somewhere else, and so he moved out of home when he was quite young to Huronia Regional Center. And so our involvement was really when he was home every weekend, one weekend a month. And we spent time together when our parents were playing euchre and having some fun. So from that and from many other people that I've met through the years, it's just, for me, it's a matter of human rights. And I just know too many people who have had few opportunities. And so that's important to me to try and help people, or to be part of that movement, I guess, is what I'd say, because I do see it as a human rights movement for people to have the same kind of opportunities as other citizens in Ontario and in Canada.
Absolutely. Institutionalization was not our finest moment. Now, you touched a bit on this, but how did Alice Saddy get its start?
So it got its start back, it celebrated 50 years last year, actually. And so a woman named Alice Saddy had been doing some volunteer work and had been involved with other organizations in the city. And at that time, it was mostly with community living, what's now called Community Living London. And Alice was just really committed to individuals and families that she'd met in the area and to volunteerism. And she had a very untimely early death. And at that time, her parish, actually, donations that were made in her name were committed then to the purchase of a house on Wolfe Street and to the development and the start of this organization, which is now, I guess it was 1973 when it incorporated, but those were the early beginnings through the Catholic Church and through just a lot of volunteer work in our community in London.
Very good. I went on your website and did some research, and I saw that you have many services to offer. Could you tell us a little bit more about those services?
Sure. So Alice Saddy Association really had its early roots with supporting people who needed more small amounts of support to really get on with their lives in a good way and to have more independence, I guess, is what I would say. Through the years, we've diversified, though, because we understand the need is bigger in the city. And so our supports are really based on the person, so the individual and family. And they can range from having a few hours a week of some one-to-one support all the way up to 24-hour support for some people who are more vulnerable in their living situations and that. So we have a big range of supports, and we're happy about that. And the way that we individualize them is because we always start with the person first and put them at the center, do some planning around the person to assist them and their family or their friends, whoever is important to them, to figure out the ways they want to be supported. And then we do our best to figure out how we can work with them and make that happen in ways. So we have what is typically funded as a supported independent living program, which is basically some supports through the Ministry of Community and Social Services. That's where we mostly get our funding. And then we also have something in a broad category called community activity supports or community participation supports. And that's mostly about supporting people outside of their home versus the other, which is kind of, helping people get on with living, whether that's some cooking or meal stuff, or whether that's getting up in the morning and getting ready, whether that's whatever that is. It looks different for each person, a little different for each person. And the community participation supports are mostly around supporting people to get out and about in their community, their neighborhoods, their streets, and, figure out meaningful activities, whether that's, work things, volunteer, whether that's learning some new stuff. It's a whole range of activities that people might choose. And typically we figure that out with a group of people around the person, unless a person can really be directly tell us what it is that they're interested in. We also provide a number of supports for people who are living in long-term care. And long-term care has been a place where many people with developmental disabilities have landed, sometimes very prematurely, in the sense that typically we think about older people living in long-term care, nursing homes, more like in their 80s. I think the median age is around 82 or something like that. But for people with developmental disabilities, sometimes their choices in terms of supports are not very great, and often they have been channeled into the long-term care because that's been the option that's available to them. So we have been involved with people living in long-term care for a long, long time, since the 80s. So, which is also a really, really good thing for those folks who are there, who are not able or not interested in moving out. Then that's how we've done that. And then one other area that I can talk about is just a Passport program, which is Passport is an initiative that came in Ontario in the early 2000s, about 2005 or 2006, something like that. And it's really an opportunity for direct funding for some people and families, and sometimes they go through an organization. But Passport is an opportunity to really say make decisions around how it is that you spend this funding. So the decision making is typically with the person and their family. And Alice Saddy Association is happy to act as a supporter of that process, because it can be difficult sometimes for families or individuals to figure that kind of stuff out on their own. And so they will come to us, and we'll give them a hand with figuring out what it is that they want to do with this funding that's been allocated to them through this Passport program.
Excellent. It sounds more like a leg up sort of program rather than a handout, which is definitely what our communities need.
Yes, I agree. I think Passport funding, it's been a really interesting thing to see how it has grown and changed through the years. Many people see it as the funding mechanism of choice, because it provides them with a lot more control over what it is that they're receiving for those funds. So it is about leg up. It is about that for sure.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that your organizations use the hashtag waiting to belong. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that hashtag is used for?
Sure. That is actually a hashtag that was part of an initiative. It really was an advocacy initiative started by the Community Living Ontario. So Alice Saddy Association, along with well over 120 other organizations in the province, belong to a group called Community Living Ontario. There are other provincial groups that we belong to too, but this one is the one that's linked with Waiting to Belong. And it basically was an attempt, and was successful in some ways, to raise awareness about the situation for many people with developmental disability in the province and their families. And it was also an opportunity to advocate, an initiative really to advocate for an increase in funding. So Waiting to Belong talks about over 50,000 adults in the province of Ontario who are part of a wait list for provincially funded services. And it's a lot of people to be waiting for some kind of support. And in our area, there's a lot of people waiting for support. Agencies like Saddy Association, while we have some control and decision making around who it is that we support, all of any person in Ontario who is looking for some kind of funded support has to go through an organization called Developmental Services Ontario, and has to go through a process, of course, to ensure their eligibility. And then it's not easy to be on from there, they're put on what they now call a registry, but it used to be called a wait list for some kind of funded developmental service. And so us participating in the Community Living Ontario advocacy effort is important because we believe that there needs to be additional funding in the system for individuals and families so that it helps to make their life better, easier, so that adults who are 50 years old have an opportunity to move out of their family home, which isn't always the case, and not everybody wants to. But there are an awful lot of people who are strapped in situations that they would like their life to look differently, but they need some support to do that. And so it's important for us as an organization that advocates for people with developmental disability and their families to push the envelope with the Ontario government, because very often people have been kind of left on the sidelines because maybe we haven't had the loudest voice. Maybe people haven't had the loudest voice. Maybe they have been seen as not as capable as others. Maybe they have not been valued in the same kind of way as others have been in society. And so that really means that there needs to be some strong strategies in place to try and advocate for more supports for folks so that they can contribute. People want to contribute, people want to be part of community, but there's a lot of folks who need a little help to be part of community, right? To just get to the door.
Yes, absolutely. I have seen statistically disability groups are the most politically sidelined, the most politically ignored. So that's a very important initiative.
Yeah, I think so too. And Community Living Ontario and OASIS, which is another provincial group, they're both very much advocating for change. And the Ontario government, I think, is making some headway with their Journey to Belonging framework, which they started a couple of years ago. It's a kind of an 8 to 10 year framework for change within our system of the way that funding comes out, of the way that supports are delivered, and the way that who puts the person in the driver's seat kind of stuff. So there are some changes that are happening in developmental services, and so rocking the boat a little bit by also providing some clear standards around what's acceptable. So in terms of inclusion, if we're just going to increase funding and then further segregate and congregate people with the same label, that's not really anything to do with inclusion. What we need to be doing is making sure that we've got some of those important things like respect and creativity and, the welcoming and belonging, and making sure that our communities are open and interested and welcoming to people so that they can contribute as all of us do in our own communities. So
that's actually a very good segue into my favorite question on the board. Without using any specific names, can you share a success story that you've witnessed?
Oh my goodness, lots of success stories, really. Lots of success stories. Should have thought about a couple of individuals before, but I can tell you about one that is kind of they've allowed us to have a little video of that. And that's a young fellow who was graduating from high school. And high schools, like the education system and other systems, need to communicate really well to ensure that people are going to get the best start in life. One of the things that we know is that people are way more successful in employment in adulthood if they've had employment opportunities as a teenager. So that's across the board. That's not just people with disabilities, but that's across the board. And so it's an important thing to work with schools to ensure that teenagers have that opportunity for employment of some kind or work experience. And so I can tell you about a young fellow who actually has, when he graduated, he'd had a little bit of experience, lots of interest in culinary. So he ended up going to Fanshawe College, which has a CI called the Community Integration through Cooperative Education. I believe that's the title is, and had an opportunity to learn way more about culinary and working in restaurants and kitchens, and has since come out, continues his 5 or 6 years post Fanshawe College, continues to learn along the way, but is working in a restaurant. So to me, and he's not working full time, but it doesn't really matter because he's working in a sense that provides him with opportunities to meet more people, to have people admire him and respect the work that he's doing. He has opportunities to, earn some money because, poverty is such a big issue for people with that label who are depending mostly on government funds or whatever. So he's had these opportunities to really enrich and expand his world. So to me, that's a big success story. What he does in another 5 or 10 years, I don't know, but probably he'll, I think he's going to have a pretty typical life in many ways, right? With the relationships that he has now and the opportunities that he has now. So for me, that's a big success story of someone quite young having the right kind of opportunities throughout and commitment from others to assist him along the way.
Very nice. When it comes to assigning supports and resources, what is your company's process for determining what supports and resources are required?
Yeah, so that's a little bit complex. I was mentioning that every person to receive a funded developmental service in Ontario, you have to go through Developmental Services Ontario or the DSO, and they do an application and they do an assessment called a supports intensity scale assessment. And the allocation really of funded developmental services in part comes through the outcome of that application process and that assessment. In part, it will change a little bit, as I mentioned, that new framework that's coming in some of the new changes that are coming in Ontario. But for us, we work closely with the DSO. They're a great bunch of people that work there, and we work closely with them. But the majority of people that we end up meeting come through phone calls. We get 15 to 20 phone calls a month from people that we've never had contact with before, individuals and families who are searching for something. And we will do our best through planning process with them to help them try and figure out what to do or where to go. Doesn't guarantee anything, but it helps, I think, to have someone that can help you or guide you a little bit. And again, we can't do that with all the folks because we don't have the capacity to engage in a meaningful planning process with every person that comes to Saddy Association. But we do the best we can, and it's through that planning process that we identify the kind of supports that people will need in order to achieve their goals, whatever it is. And as I mentioned before, it's so individualized that, I don't really know what one person is going to want. Even if they have a similar story to somebody else, they may want something very different. It's just like the families that, see themselves sharing home together for many, many years, or the young person who says, I don't want to live with my parents anymore, and my parents support me in not living with them anymore. And what can how can I shape my life the way I want it? And so it's, of course, easiest for sure in doing that planning if people already have a bit of a vision for themselves. But what we know is that sometimes people who have that label and have that kind of life experience don't really know what they want because they haven't had the exposure. And so planning is listening to people, deeply listening to people, including the people that love them and care about the person. And it's also about exploring options and ideas. And so that takes time, and we don't have the capacity for doing that with with all the new people that come to us, but we certainly try and do that as much as possible with the people that we're currently involved with, and a few new people as we move along. So it's listening and it's exploring, and then it's trying to put an action plan in place, and it's also appealing to the other partners in our community, because we work closely with all of the other developmental service providers in the City of London and the region. And we work a lot with the Ministry of Community and Social Services. So the process for an individual to go through is through the Developmental Services Ontario. If there's an immediate need, then there are some systems in place to assist them, and that typically comes through Developmental Services Ontario. And then having the right connections, I guess, that like finding the right people to help you navigate the system is pretty important in my mind. And sometimes we can figure things out reasonably quickly for folks, and sometimes it's a way longer process. So when we talked about those wait lists or that registry now, it can be years that people are on a wait list, and it can be very difficult for people, like extremely difficult for individuals and families. So that's that's kind of how we allocate is typically the folks who have been part of Saddy Association for quite a long time. We modify and change the supports as needed as much as possible. For people who are newer coming to us, then the process is a bit more defined in that if they're eligible for a funded developmental service, then we work with DSO and the ministry on trying to establish what that is and how much it will cost to do that. So
we have about 5 minutes to go, and I only have 2 questions left for you. And firstly, just if you can name me just one thing that you see happening that shouldn't be over and over again with people with disabilities, and how do we stop that one thing?
I would say that the congregation and segregation of people based on label leads to really low expectations and doesn't provide an opportunity for people to really shine for who they are and what they can contribute to our communities. And so I would say the segregation and congregation of people is pretty difficult for people to shine and be who they can be. So that would be one thing that I would say. And that's based on my many years of helping people move out of those big institutions. I did that through many provincial initiatives, assisting in the planning with probably about 100 people in the area over many years, and working with the planners, linked with those folks to get them out into community. But that's just one step. The bigger part is real inclusion for people. And you get that through not congregating people, not segregating people, but in fact by offering opportunities for support to work, to learn, to go to all of the regular places that we all go to on a regular basis, to get to know folks, to build relationships. So.
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, you can see that all around us. So my last is a 2-pronged question, actually. If there are any events coming up with your organization, and if someone wanted to get involved with you or start volunteering with you or to be a client of yours, how could they get involved with those events, and how could they contact you?
Sure, that's great. So I was just going to say that we don't have regular big events happening through Saddy Association, and that may change a little bit. But we do have a group called Friends of Saddy, and the Friends of Saddy works with both our association and the Saddy Foundation. The Saddy Foundation has been instrumental in supporting housing for a number of people, supported by our organization. Housing, we didn't talk about that. We didn't talk much about poverty, but the cost of housing right now and the difficulty around housing. And so what I can say is the foundation has been instrumental in assisting us with that. So the Friends of Saddy kind of works with both the association and the foundation, and they have been hosting some events. So just recently they were part of an event at the public library downtown to talk about, what's available for volunteering. And then most recently, we had a little muffins and mingle on a Saturday morning here at our office on King Street, because we're downtown on King, close to Maitland. So we had a muffins and mingle time just to really get together and to chat. We're involved with some family groups, so that might be another area that some people, it's not an Alice Saddy family group, but there are family groups in the city that we support and encourage and that. So we could tell people about that as well, I guess. In terms of volunteering, there are opportunities to volunteer with Alice Saddy Association through our committees and our volunteer board. We have at times linked individuals with other individuals in community to share and learn. And most recently, we've been just in the starting stages of talking with a service club here in London that is interested in linking up and welcoming some new members. And so I think there will be more opportunities in the future for that type of volunteering. But at this point, and who they could call me at Alice Saddy Association, Marg McLean, or Marg M at alicesaddy.com. I'd encourage people to go to our website. There is an info at alicesaddy.com, and I end up getting the majority of those emails, so can respond. We also have someone who works most directly with families, Kathy Smith, and she's also another contact. Lots of us, you can contact just about anybody together with Alice Saddy Association and end up getting to the right place. Because there's so many great employees that are working with us, and we try and have that kind of open door, kind of good communication path all the time with everybody we're linked to. It's important for us to work together.
Well, thank you very much, Marg. That's been a very informative interview.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. It really, for me, it's near and dear to my heart, right? It is about what all of us want for ourselves. We want diversity, we want welcoming, we want inclusion, we want opportunities to show our gifts, to share our gifts, whatever they might be. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity. So thanks so much, Lily. I do.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, this has been a V4A interview. I'm Lilly Cereghini, and remember, stick together because we are all in this together.